Hi, I'm Mike Saxenian. Welcome to my vlog series, edX Talks. Each episode, I'll be speaking with one of our expert teachers or administrators about how we use the abilities model to enable our students to thrive here at McLean School. So relax while we tell you about transformative education at McLean. Welcome back to McLean School for another edX Talk. I'm here with Paul Beliveau, and soon we'll be speaking also with Robyn Weiss. Paul is our math department chair and an upper school math teacher. Robyn is a math teacher in the middle school. Paul, it's great to see you this morning.
Here.
So let's start off. Just tell me a little bit about your background and what brought you here to McLean.
Out of college, I had no idea what I wanted to do. And I got a job full-time at a gymnastics club. And I worked at several gymnastics clubs through my 20s. And
That sounds, by the way, that sounds like teaching gymnastics. There you go, good foundation.
Well, I quickly figured out really the only skill I have in this world is explaining complicated things to frightened children. So when I got to the point where I figured I didn't want to actually own my own gymnastics club someday, that left switching into education. So I went back into graduate school at my 20s, and after a few years working at public schools and another independent school, I came to McLean, and what impressed me most on the first day here was just how hyper-focused the teachers were on the kids in the classroom. I just saw how good the McLean teachers were at making use of that classroom time to impart the knowledge to the kids. And honestly, Ms. Diamond says I was a little competitive about it. I just wanted to run with these guys. I just wanted to compete with them.
So what kind of challenges do you see students having with math in particular?
I can't tell you the number of times I've told people what I do, and they've said, oh, math, that's so hard, I can't do it, I'm bad at it. And it's never would occur to me to be introduced to an English teacher and say, oh, I can't read, I'm illiterate. I think kids there's a preconception. Kids hear all the time, math is hard, math is hard, math is hard. But I don't think it has to be. So a lot of kids come in frightened, they don't like the subject, maybe they haven't been successful with the topic in the past. And my job is just to show them they can be successful at it.
What are some of the things you do to reduce math anxiety or other teachers here at McLean do?
There are two things. One, you get to know the child. You build that relationship. And try and find out why specifically they're afraid of the math, or just try and make them more comfortable with you personally. That personal comfort level is what will alleviate a large amount of the anxiety that the student has with the subject. And the small class sizes here really help with that. The second thing is you have to plan your lessons for the kids in front of you, and you have to set them up to be as successful as possible. Sometimes that means altering the pacing. Sometimes that means of the dozen ways you can teach a lesson, tweak it for the child who's struggling the most. There's got to be some way to give that child a taste of success.
Are there any examples that come to mind, specific examples where a student was facing a challenge and then overcame it?
There was one student who was struggling, and I remember that the biggest thing was pop culture references. There was a student who could not get a physics problem, and I turned it into a quote from Silence of the Lambs, the 90s thriller movie. And this kid was very much into 80s and 90s movies, and I didn't think he would get it. I thought this is totally going to fail. And somehow mentioning that movie immediately allowed the student to see that the physics problem was about a weight on a rope in a well.
That's wonderful how you incorporate the real world, the things that matter to the child, into their math education.
That's a good way to put it, because sometimes the real world and what matters to the child are two different things. There's a lot of literature on the positive effects of using real-world examples, but sometimes what's lost is what that means to an adolescent. I'm going to have more luck using an example from Iron Man than I am using a real space shuttle example, for the most part, because superheroes are often more real to these kids.
Yeah, that's great. So, Robyn, tell me about your background.
Well, so similar to Paul, I didn't necessarily start out knowing I wanted to be a math teacher. As a matter of fact, starting college, the only thing I did know is that I wasn't going to be a teacher, but all of that changed.
Sounds like you maybe have other teachers in your family.
Yeah, a little bit. My mom was a teacher, and my grandmother, yes. Throughout college, I really developed a love of math, and it was one of my senior professors who kind of pulled me aside at one point and said, you need to not be researching this full-time, you need to be in the classroom, and so that turned it around for me. So I've been just in independent schools, always had experience with relatively small class sizes, which I very much appreciate. It's nice to have other teachers teaching the same thing, but also be able to build upon what other teachers have been doing or try to lead towards what other teachers are doing. Sure.
Yeah, I mean, that was certainly true for me when I went through public school decades ago, that I felt like I was just learning a bunch of formulas. and didn't really have the context. And I see here at McLean, students are really internalizing how this is meaningful in their lives. And you've also developed some approaches to further reducing anxiety associated with math. And in fact, I think have developed a national model for that. Can you talk a little bit about the work that you've done in that area?
Sure. So 2 years ago, we thought about removing grades as we currently define them, or how they're sort of culturally defined, a letter grade or a percentage, just removing that from a pre-algebra class at all to try to alleviate some of that stress and really put the focus back on what we're learning, what the students are thinking about, what they are learning. And so we have one pre-algebra class each year for the last 2 years that's been ungraded. They receive a lot of feedback. We have a lot of metacognitive moments where the students are really learning to think about what they are learning, rather than going towards some goal of just, I have to get a B in order to make my parents happy, which doesn't really define success in a very helpful way for them. I had an 8th grade female who from the beginning of the year told me, I'm not a math person. I really struggle with math. People have tried. I asked the students to complete some summer work surrounded around growth mindset. She was in study hall one day, I think it was probably 3rd quarter, so good part of the way through the year, really struggling with a concept. And really put a lot of time into working on this assignment. And one of the other students in the study hall said, why does it matter? You're in the ungraded class. It doesn't mean anything. And she said, no, but I want to learn this. And she did. She wanted to learn it, but if she wasn't able to learn it that day, there wasn't going to be a penalty in there for her.
That's wonderful. Thanks for joining us for this conversation with Robyn and earlier with Paul. It's been great being with you again today, and I'll see you next time.